Hello, teacher and classmate. Today we are the group number 1 and
we're going to talk about
I need you to please pay careful attention to what my classmates and I are going to present. And now, let's get into business.
Hello, we are going to talk about naturalistic research. And to begin with this presentation, we are going to give a definition about this topic. And it says the social context, situations where people usually interact, in this case with the researchers, in which people communicate influences what occurs. In this case, the researcher very carefully observes and records some behavior over a prolonged period. But to make this kind of research, we need an approach, and this is naturalistic inquiry. The researcher focuses on how people behave when absorbed in genuine life experiences in natural settings. What it wants to say is that the researcher observes, describes, and interprets the experiences and actions on a specific people and groups. Therefore, they work in places where people live and work, drawing on observation, interviews of descriptive data. And let me tell you that there are common assumptions guiding naturalistic inquiry, but the goal of naturalistic research is to develop context-specific statements about the multiple constructed realities of all the key participants. But another goal is to generate new questions to improve observations and interpretations. And the three general assumptions of naturalistic research is the first one, naturalism, the belief that phenomena should be studied in context. It means that the researchers observe, record, as I told you before, very carefully some behavior in its natural setting while interfering as little as possible with the subject or the phenomena. And we have the second one, phenomenology, the belief that the object of interest be examined without any preconceived notions or expectations. In other words, it studies and explores what people experience and focuses on their experience of a phenomenon. And the third one, interpretive nature of naturalistic research, the belief that the researcher, while trying to see the situation from the point of view of those studied, cannot escape his or her own point of view. In this case, the investigator interprets how people make sense about the world as they are in their natural context. As I told you before, it can be in their work or in their daily life activities. And we have some types of naturalistic inquiry, and they are four. The first one is ethnography. The use of direct observation and extended field research to produce a thick naturalistic description of a people and their culture. As I told you before, the researcher interacts with people, or in this case with the participants. And to understand this point better, it studies the culture of certain people or group. And we have ethnomethodology, the empirical study of methods used to give sense to unaccomplished daily actions, attempt to understand commonplace talk routines. So, people talk with the researchers in order to interact with them In that way, they are going to interpret the conversation and to know more about the phenomenon. And we have ethnomethodological indifference, used by ethnomethodologists to abstain from judging other actions. At this point refers to methods and practices and in particular groups that employs its everyday activities. And we have experimental breaking, deliberately upsetting pattern routines to reveal rules participants use to organize experiences. In other words, it seeks to examine people's reactions to violations of commonly accepted social rules or norms, and it involves the conscious exhibition of unexpected behavior. That's why we have two types of ethnomethodological inquiry. The first one is conversation analysis. This is very important to get data or to gather data because it examines interaction using qualitative methods. The researchers talk with people or the participants to embrace both verbal and nonverbal conduct in situations of everyday life. We have formal ethnomethodology, perspective used by the researchers to view taken for granted behavior. We have critical ethnography, ethnography designed to promote emancipation and reduce oppression. It gives voice to mistreated people and those struggling for social change. Through this, the approach seeks to determine research participants' behavior within historical, cultural, and social frameworks. And we have autoethnography, personal ethnography. Researchers examine their own life, experiences, and field work. The researchers are going to examine participants' life also, and they are going to determine their experiences and fieldwork. We have autobiography, a study of one's own life, exemplified in autoethnography. This is a way in which the author, or in this case the researcher, uses self-reflection and writing to explore personal experience and to connect this story to wider cultural, political, and social meaning and understanding. This approach is used for the researchers when they want to do a qualitative research and they need to see the actions and the daily life of the participants to determine the phenomenon.
Okay, now I would like to develop the following topic that is called the flow of naturalistic inquiry. But let's begin defining what naturalistic inquiry is. Naturalistic inquiry is an approach to understand the social world in which the researcher observes, describes, and interprets the experiences and actions of specific people and groups in social and cultural context. So now let's move on to an important point, that is characteristic of the naturalistic research process. Let's begin with the number one. Sight. Sight, it is about studying the phenomena in context. Then we have embodied practice. In the embodied practice refers to the researchers place their bodies in a context and use themselves as the primary instrument to collect data. And then we have qualitative methods. Besides that, naturalistic researchers use non-random purposive sampling. But let me give you the definition what a non-random purposive sampling is. It is a process of identifying a population of interest and developing a systematic way of selecting cases that is not based on advanced knowledge of how the outcomes would appear. In naturalistic research, we have the following things: informant, an emergent design, and also members check. Informants, they can provide unique insight into a culture. An emergent design introduces or changes procedures during the research process. And finally, members check. Members checks occur when researchers give a draft of the research report to participants or similar people for feedback. Then, let's move on to another important point that is called collecting data, but in this case, collecting data on naturalistic inquiry. As everybody knows, that collecting data is the process of gathering and measuring information on target variables in an established system, which then enables one to answer relevant questions and evaluate outcomes. There are two major investigative strategies used by naturalistic researchers. Then we have direct observation, but let's define what direct observation is. Direct observation is the collection of information using your sense. How come? By observing, you can document activities, behavior, and physical aspects. In a few words, the researchers is the main instrument on it. So let's continue with the second one, that is in-depth interview. What is an in-depth interview? An in-depth interview uses an unstructured format consisting of open-ended questions in places and under conditions that are comfortable and familiar to them. So now, let's talk about the role of the observers. Naturalistic researchers must decide on the observational role to assume four types. The first one, complete participant. Complete participant means that researchers do not let people know they are being studied. We have the second one, participant observer. Participant observer involved as fully as possible in a social situation where people know they are being studied. Then, observer participant. In observer participant, primarily observes and participates only to a limited extent. Then finally, complete observer does not interact with the people.
So let's continue with interviewing in naturalistic inquiry. Interviews are used to obtain information from a relatively small representative sample so that generalization can be made about the population of interest. Here we are going to talk about in-depth interviews. In contrast to survey, proceed intuitively and use an unstructured format consisting of open questions, highly exploratory. There are several initial interviews phases including a huge interview and sampling strategy. Here I'm going to mention some important points. That the first one is purposive non-random sample. Here is also known as judgmental, selective, or subjective sampling. There is a form of non-probability sampling in which researchers rely on their own judgment when choosing members of the population to participate in their study. Another one is key informants. Key informants are qualitative in-depth interview with people who know what is going on in the community. The purpose of key informants is to collect information from a wide range of people, including community leaders, professionals, or residents who have first-hand knowledge about the community. So we have also a theory-based sample. This is the process of selecting incidents, of life, a period of time, or people on the basis of their potential manifestation or representation of important theoretical constructs. The other one is network. Network is snowball sample. Well, this is a recruitment method that employs research into participant social network to access a specific population. Another one is convenience sample. This is a type of a non-probability sampling method where the sample is taken from a group of people easy to contact or to reach. Also, it's important to mention about the interview. Logistics must be also be addressed ranging from where, one-on-one versus team approach, along or together, a focus group, and when. Also, the interview format must also be ascertained prior to data collection. Unstructured versus structured type. Use a long interview that uses a questionnaire to create a sharply focused and intense series of message. Also, you can use a funnel that proceeds from general to specific levels of unit. So, there are also a variety of interview method and philosophy, but the most popular and the most common are. The first one is about the phenomenology, that this is based on interviews that are used to understand how people experience life processes without imposing preconceptions. And another one is feminist perspective, that is basically speak to the unique experience of women. Also, we have ethnomethodological interview and life story interview or oral history story. So we can mention also about some techniques, and one of them is about the critical incident technique, that is asked for most memorable positive and negative experience within a specific or social context. Also, we have the episode analysis, that is based on the reconstruction of a scene that represent a recurring pattern in a relationship. And also we have the account analysis, that is asking people to account for observation. Also, the protocol analysis, that is the verbalization of feelings, thoughts while engaged in activity. And also we can mention about the stimulator recall, that is using a tape recording, for example, to help trigger participant reflections of exchange. Another important thing to mention is that when recording and transcribing interviews, the amount of details depend on the purpose of the research and must be done accurately.
Now we have to analyze and report qualitative data. First, let's take into account that a massive amount of details must be made sense and reported. For this, we have to consider Levine's 5 general storage and retrieval processes. Analyzing qualitative data involves that, first, it should be viewed as an ongoing process. Second, collected data must be reduced. Third, the goal is to explain the meaning of the data. For this, we have two kinds of explanations. First order explanations, which are the research participants' explanations, and second order explanations, which are the researchers' explanations. Testing theory and building grounded theory. Some researchers analyze data deductively to see if it conforms to their expectations, which means that they infer meanings from the data collected, looking for emerging patterns. Research that seeks to develop theory from the ground up should meet four criteria: believable, comprehensive, grounded, and applicable. Now, let's see some of the qualitative data analytic techniques. Dialectical analysis, which explores tensions produced from seemingly contradictory elements within a system. Metaphor analysis, which seeks participants' use of metaphors. And fantasy theme analysis, which examines the stories shared among people. Reporting findings from naturalistic research can be done by: number 1, telling a tale, a story told by a member of one culture about another culture to the members of his or her own culture. This test can be realistic tale, which is a story told from the point of view of the people studied; a confessional tale, which focuses primarily on the research and his or her experiences during fieldwork; impressionistic, which blends realistic and confessional tales to provide an account of the participants and the researcher as central characters; a critical tale, which critiques problematic social structures through the perspective of those who are disadvantaged; formal tale, it follows the rules of a particular theory or analytic procedure; literary tale, which is told using a novelistic sense of narration; and a jointly told tale, in which researchers and participants work together. Number 2, writing a report, which can be developed using techniques such as thematic, chronological report, puzzle explanation, separate narration and analysis, narrowing and expanding the focus, and exemplars, which are quotes and descriptions that help illustrate and crystallize the concept. Number 3, other forms of presentation, such as performance, film, or photography. To sum up, naturalistic researchers must identify and gain entry to the site they want to study, determine the role they will take, what and how they will observe, who they will interview, and what they will ask, and how to record the information and present it.